Good day to you. Today we talk about the matter of torture, inhuman treatment and punishment, enforced disappearances. We take this together with the rights of persons under custodial investigation because they usually go together. Persons who may be subject of custodial investigation to elicit confession may be subjected to torture, may be subjected to inhuman treatment or punishment. Um, Also, persons who are arrested or accosted, taken into custody by the police, may be subject to disappearances, no enforced disappearances. Um, this lecture, as a matter of caveat, may be very graphic but necessary. I will try to be less graphic about it, but as law students, you must learn the kinds or instances of the commission of the violations of the laws on torture, human treatment, and enforced disappearances. So that's my caveat. Um, Magpakatatag, okay? Sige. So in the Philippines, we are not a stranger to torture and the inhuman treatment of uh, prisoners or persons accused of crimes, no? Because in fact, we may have seen or heard on TV such instances when persons detained by persons in authority have been subjected to um, severe physical and psychological trauma. Um, you have there examples, those are actual incidents in the Philippines. Those depict actual incidents in the Philippines. There's one picture there where I think the high-ranking police officer, a chief of police, I think, tied a string to the genitals of the person whom they arrested to elicit confession. It made the news years ago, and the chief of police, the policeman, was actually subjected to criminal and administrative consequences. There's that other wheel there, that ruleta, the wheel of torture, whereby the prisoner, not the prisoner, a person who is arrested or taken into custody, uh, uh, is tortured in accordance with where the arrow or where the wheel brings him, no? For example, waterboarding, kung matunong dito sa wheel, waterboarding, lumsan ka. Kung kulatahon ka, uh, that's also a possibility, or cigarette burning, no? So depende kung asa mahulog, no? Um, so usually ang common is the most common is hitting the person at different parts of his body. So it um, it it is undeniable that in the Philippines, according to Amnesty International, these are the top torture techniques: electric shocks, beating, punching, and kicking, striking with wooden batons or metal bars, burning skin with cigarettes, waterboarding, near asphyxiation with plastic bags, forcing detainees to assume stress positions, stripping detainees naked, and tying and pulling genitalia with a string, hanging detainees upside down, mock executions, um, shooting, and rape. These are all prohibited by law. These are all unacceptable. The severity of this um, is highly felt by existing laws. The thing is, the list that you see on screen is just a sample, because the human mind is so perverse and evil sometimes that he could have creative ways of torturing another. So, under international law, Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment, there is a definition of torture that is adopted under Philippine laws. The term torture means any act of which severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental. No? Sabing torture, any act. There is no exclusion of, there is no exclusivity. It refers to any act. There is no exclusivity of actions. The list could be infinite, no? Which severe pain or suffering, which is physical or mental. So hindi lang physical pain, but psychological stress also or pain, no? Is intentionally inflicted on a person. There is intent for such purpose as obtaining from him or a third person. Bakit third person? Because another third person may be made witness to torture so that the third person will admit, or the person is subjected to mental torture because a loved one or a friend or a relative is tortured in his presence. So there is information that is obtained or a confession punishing him for an act or a third an act he or a third person has committed. So it will be punishment, no? Torture is a form of punishment, or is suspected of having committed or intimidating or coercing him or a third person for any reason based on discrimination of any kind when such pain or suffering is inflicted by or at the instigation of which the consent or acquiescence of a public officer or other person acting in an official capacity. So pwede yung torture committed by, let's say, pinapasok ka sa cell, sa jail, ano? Then, the person of authority, the policeman, would ask another inmate, another person in custody, or another person, no, not necessarily a policeman, instructing him to torture you or subject you to physical harm. That's a possibility. It does not include pain or suffering arising from only from inherent or incidental lawful sanction. So, natural, no? If you're imprisoned, if you are subjected to hard labor as a consequence of your conviction, that is not part of the definition under international law. Okay, mind you, this definition is adopted in Philippine in Philippine law. So, the same prescription has also the description of what cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment of or punishment, which is also protected against or protected against by persons of authority or their agents against those who may be arrested or other instances, no? So you have the fundamental basis under our Constitution. We actually mentioned this before when we began with the rights of persons under custodial investigation. Diba? Sabi doon, any person under investigation for the commission of an offense, etc., etc., and they should not be subjected to torture, force, violence, threat, intimidation, or any other means which vitiate the free will, shall not be used against him, nor shall secret detention places. So ito yung secret detention places, ito yung you are hidden away from your relatives, no? So ito yung enforced disappearances or other similar forms of detentions are prohibited. Any confession or admission obtained in violation of this, again, fruit of the poisonous tree. Okay. So, because the Constitution says that the law shall provide for penal and civil sanctions for violations of this section, we have these two laws. We have RA 9745, an act penalizing torture or other cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment and prescribing penalties therefor, or the Anti-Torture Act. We have RA 10353, an act defining and penalizing enforced or involuntary disappearances. That's the Anti-Enforced or Involuntary Disappearances Act of 2012. So let's begin with RA 9745, the Anti-Torture Act of 2009. Mind you, these two laws came as necessary. Some would say because of lessons learned, again, from previous abuses during or before even the effectivity of the 1987 Constitution. So first, you have RA 9745, the Anti-Torture Act. Again, caveat, the description that you will have to see here may be too graphic, but laban, kasi you have to know this because you may have clients who will be facing these challenges later. No? So again, definition, this is the same definition that you find under international law, under the Covenant Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment. The same law also adapts the description of international law of what cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment, which is the deliberate and aggravated treatment or punishment that's specifically enumerated under the anti-torture law. So what is adapted is the proscription against, but this definition is the shotgun provision. When it is not covered by the anti-torture law, it may be covered by the other cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment or punishment section or provision of the same law. So for the purpose of inflicted by person in authority or agent of person in authority against a person under his custody which attains a level of severity causing suffering, gross humiliation, debasement to the latter. This the first one refers to torture. This one refers in general to treatment because torture is a form of treatment, degrading treatment or inhuman treatment. But this provision will also now cover punishment, even torture as punishment. So what is not mentioned in the list later that we will take up is covered by this other cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment. So acts of torture, it may be physical or mental. So physical torture is a form of treatment or punishment inflicted by a person in authority or agent of a person in authority upon another in his custody that causes severe pain, exhaustion, disability, or dysfunction of one or more parts of the body. So physical pain results from the acts of a person in authority. The accused here is a person in authority, government agent. So this is a law against government agents. Mental or psychological torture refers to acts committed by, again, persons in authority or agents of person in authority which are calculated to affect or confuse the mind and or undermine a person's dignity and moral. So, apela din ha ang saywar, no? Or the use of even narcotics to saywar that results to psychological torture-like results, no? Calculated to confuse the mind. Okay, so there's that level of severity that is required of mental or psychological torture. Okay, so it's let's go to physical torture. Systematic beating, head banging, punching, kicking, striking with a truncheon or a rifle butt or other similar objects, or jumping on the stomach. Okay? It speaks for itself. Food deprivation or forcible feeding with spoiled food, animal or human excreta, or other stuff or substances not normally eaten. See? It could be deprivation, you are not made to eat, or if you are compelled to eat, non-edible things that are, gross. Electric shock, it speaks for itself. Cigarette burning, pagpasok ng skin or any part of your body with cigarettes. Burning by electrically heated rods, hot oil, acid, by rubbing of pepper or other chemical substances or mucous membranes, or acids or spices directly on the wound. Wow. So, pasok or paglagay sa open wound ng certain substances that would result to pain. Submersion of the head, lumsan in water or water polluted with excrement, maduming tubig, urine, vomit, etc. Hayak. Oh, sorry. Until the brink of suffocation. Being tied or forced to assume a fixed and stressful bodily position. So, tatali ka sa isang position na eventually nasa-strain ka, masakit kasi prolonged position at that, maintaining that prolonged position may cause physical pain or stress, no? So maybe pwede diha you are tied upside down, no? Physical torture also includes rape and sexual abuse, including the insertion of foreign objects into the sex organ or rectum. Or electrical torture with genitals, mutilation or amputation of essential parts of the body such as genitalia. Well, all body parts are essential. All essential. If it's not essential, ano ba ang non-essential na body part? Buhok. But if it causes, kahit na buhok, if it causes embarrassment, that's also torture, no? For me, no? Uko, no? This refers to mutilation or amputation of essential parts. Physical torture includes also dental torture or forced extraction of teeth, or pulling out of one's fingernails, perhaps with the use of pliers. Harmful exposure to the elements such as sunlight, extreme cold. So pag ibulad ka sa init, or you are made to stand in the cold of the night, or maybe you are made to sit on a block of ice. No? The use of plastic bags or other materials placed over the head to the point of asphyxiation. That's very self-explanatory. It also use, as I mentioned earlier, it also includes the use of psychoactive drugs to change the perception, memory, alertness, or will of a person, such as drugs which would allow you to, which would induce confession or reduce mental competency, kanang truth serum or what, ano? Or the use of drugs to induce extreme pain or certain symptoms of a disease, or other analogous acts of physical torture. The term analogous acts is the shotgun provision, those which are not in the list, for as long as they result to the same effects or consequence na torture, that it's included. Okay. So why the analogous circumstances? Because the human mind is so perverse. You could think of so many ways to torture a person. Mental or psychological torture. Okay? This includes blindfolding. The effect of being blindfolded. What scares a person is not knowing where he is or who is watching him, what is being threatened to be done to him. So blindfolding, when you are arrested, results to emotional mental stress, threatening a person or his relatives with bodily harm, execution, or other wrongful acts. Papatayin kita mamaya. Papatayin ko tatay mo. Diba? Ikidnapin namin ang family mo. That's psychological torture. Confinement in a solitary cell or secret detention place. By the way, the context here is person is taken in, he is threatened that he is being tortured while he is in custody. That be the general scenario here. So confinement in solitary cells or secret detention places. Okay. That is also punishable under the enforced disappearances law. By the way, if you are threatened with physical harm and you are not in the custody of the police as yet, that could be another crime. Grave threats siguro, no? Okay. Prolonged interrogation. Okay. Preparing a prisoner for a show trial, public display, or public humiliation of a detainee or a prisoner. Preparing muna a prisoner, no? Pakaulawan ka na mo. Okay. Or what, no? Or a show trial, a mock trial. Causing an unscheduled transfer of person deprived of liberty from one place to another, creating the belief that he or she be summarily executed. So from the detention place, transport ka from one place to another. That's the that's one of the effects of, remember, the use of video devices, body cameras in arresting persons. Diba, ang requirement is that you should bring the person immediately to the police station immediately. Dili na siya i-tour around the city in the diversion road or in Mintal when your police station is in Lanang, because that would give him the impression na maybe I will be summarily executed. Okay? But here, this is an unscheduled transfer. On that same tenor ba? A person is already in the custody of the police. He's transferred from one place to another. So suddenly, okay, labas tayo. Okay, we'll go somewhere. And then, look, asan nyo kami dadalhin? Wala man namang hearing kasi it's evening, no? So that's psychological torture. maltreating a member of or members of a person's family. Okay, so that's you knowing or seeing a member of the family maltreated. Maltreatment is a very broad term. Because a member of the family is maltreated, you'll be forced to confess. Causing the torture sessions to be witnessed by the person's family, relatives, or any third party. Papakita sa family mo para sila ang masaktan. Denial of sleep or rest. Person who is deprived of sleep, eventually nabubuang yan eh. Loses his sanity. Physically and mentally, he becomes very weak. Mental and psychological torture also includes public shaming. Public shaming, parading him in public places. You have seen this in the news, public officials parading yung mga suspects sa drug pushing, lalagyan ng placards sa neck, wag tularan, pusher ako. Ganyan. That's public humiliation, that's bawal. Even on TV, you see the chief of police reprimanding a person in media or in front of many people. That's actually psychological torture. Deliberately prohibiting the victims to communicate with any member of his family. This also violates the provisions on enforced disappearances. But here, the family may know where he is, but he is deprived of communication to his member of the family. It tortures him, not only him, but his family also. Other analogous acts of mental or psychological torture. Again, the phrase other analogous acts recognizes the depravity, the perversity of the human mind of the criminal. Could think of creative ways to torture mentally a person. So the list provided by law, again, is not exclusive. The right is an absolute right. The right against torture is an absolute right. A state of war or threat of war, internal political instability, or other public emergency, or a document or any determination comprising an order of battle shall not and can never be invoked as a justification for torture or other cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment. It's an absolute right. You can claim it anytime, regardless of the condition of the country. Secret detention places, solitary confinement, incommunicado, and similar forms of detention where torture may be carried out with impunity are hereby prohibited. This is also part of the Anti-Enforced Disappearances Act and also written in the Constitution. Well, most of the words here you find in the Constitution also. But the purpose here is for torture, no? There's a danger of being tortured in such detention places which are hidden away from your family. The obligation of the PNP and AFP, they are required to provide a list of all detention centers and facilities under their respective jurisdiction with the corresponding data on the prisoners or detainees incarcerated in detention or detained therein. Also, similar to the Enforced Disappearances Act, they are required to provide you with a registry of all the detention places, including the log book for the prisoners in each detention place, which must be available to the public. Remember on TV, you may have seen on the news, somewhere in Luzon, a police station with a secret detention area hidden away sa likod ng aparador. May hidden door. That's prohibited under the anti-torture law. This is also part of the fruit of the poisonous tree. Any confession or admission or statement obtained as a result of torture shall be inadmissible in evidence in any proceeding, except if the same is used as evidence against the person accused of committing torture. So you can use this against the police officer, the law enforcement officer, or his agent. Torture is a crime. As a crime, shall not absorb or shall not be absorbed by other crimes or felony committed as a consequence or as a means to conduct commission thereof. So you are tortured, you can file a case for violation of the anti-torture law, plus physical injuries, perhaps, or if you have been sexually abused, maybe rape, or acts of lasciviousness also. It's not absorbed. It's standalone penalty or offense. Persons who have committed any act of torture will not benefit from any amnesty. So if you have committed torture, amnesty will not protect you. You know in Consti 1 what amnesty is. It's specifically for political violations of politically motivated crimes, like you go back to your constituent under the powers of the president. No? So amnesty will not benefit those who will torture people. No? Kasi nga, this will include, in fact, torture in times of war or in matters or in instances where there are political upheavals. So they cannot benefit from amnesty. Let's go to RA 10353 or the Anti-Enforced or Involuntary Disappearances Act of 2012. This is a very crucial law because it relates to other rights. When a person disappears, no, the following rights are probably or possibly deprived of him: the right to security and the dignity of his person, the right not to be subjected to torture or other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, because who would know what is being done to you? You are hidden away from the public. The right to humane conditions of detention, the right to legal personality, because you cannot go to court kasi tinago ka nga. How will then you have your day in court if you are hidden away from the public or even the courts? The right to a fair trial, the right to a family life. You are hidden away from your family. When you disappear, your family suffers in eternity until you are seen again. There are families that have been suffering for decades because their loved ones were kidnapped by law enforcement agents allegedly during the time of Marcos. They have yet to find justice for their family or their loved ones. So it's not the person who is affected, but his family, of course. The wife, the children, the parents. When the disappeared person is killed, of course, his right to life is violated. So in the case of Navia versus Pardico in 2012, these are the elements that would tell you na you have committed the crime. There will be an arrest, detention, abduction of any form or any form of deprivation of liberty, that it is carried out by or with the authorization, support, or acquiescence of the state or a political organization, that it be followed by the state or political organization's refusal to acknowledge or give information to the fate of the fate or whereabouts of the person. Tinago ka, no acknowledgement as to your whereabouts. That the intention of such refusal is to remove the subject person from the protection of law for a prolonged period of time. You have no legal personality kasi nga tinago ka. How could you have your day in court? So the right against enforced or involuntary disappearances shall not, and fundamental safeguards for its prevention shall not be suspended under circumstances including political instability, threat of war, state of war, or other public emergencies, like the anti-torture law. War or public emergency does not become an excuse for the commission of this, an excuse for the deprivation of your rights. Access to communication, like in enforced disappearance, in the anti-torture law, it shall be the absolute right, absolute, not conditional, of any person deprived of liberty to have immediate access to any form of communication in order for him or her to inform his or her family, relatives, friends, lawyer, or human rights organization of his or her whereabouts and condition. So if you have been arrested, you can require the law enforcement officer to provide you with communications, okay, or access to communications. Certification, like the anti-torture law, when anyone inquires on the presence of the whereabouts of a reported victim of enforced or involuntary disappearances, the official or officer in charge shall immediately issue a certification in writing to the inquiring person or entity on the presence or absence of information on the whereabouts of such disappeared person, stating, among others, in clear, unequivocal, or categorical manner, the date, the time of inquiry, details of the inquiry, and the response to the inquiry. So this is a matter of evidence that is provided, which can be used by the family or persons, loved ones of the person who disappears, so that a necessary case may be filed in court. No? Okay, writ of amparo, habeas corpus, or whatever remedy that may be available under the Anti-Enforced Disappearances Act or the Anti-Torture Act. What is the duty of the fiscal? So pag dinala sa fiscal yung accused or yung victim para i-inquest or file ng kaso, kapag nalaman ng fiscal, he has the duty, not the option, the duty to immediately disclose the victim's whereabouts to his immediate family, relatives, lawyers, or human rights organization by the most expedient means. So dapat ipaalam niya pag nalaman niya kasi dinala sa kanya kasi finailan ng kaso. Okay. Place of detention and register, of course, like the Anti-Torture Act here, there must be a register of such persons maintained in detention places. Ano? So all persons detained or confined shall be placed solely in officially recognized and controlled places of detention. Those which are state registered as legitimate facilities for detention, no? Di lang maski asa na warehouse. And there must be a register of persons in such detention places. Relatives, judges, lawyers, official bodies, and all persons who have legitimate interest in the whereabouts and condition of persons deprived of liberty shall have free access to the register. Okay, free access. Okay. It's a continuing offense. As long as the perpetrators continue to conceal the fate and the whereabouts of the disappeared person, such circumstances have not been determined with certainty. So you, the police officer, you are committing a continuing offense, and it does not prescribe. The prosecution of persons responsible for the enforced involuntary disappearance shall not prescribe. It shall not prescribe unless the victim surfaces alive. In which case, if the victim surfaces alive, there shall be 25 years from the date of such appearance. You know what is prescription? You are familiar with that in your criminal law. The period in which you can file a case. No amnesty, like the anti-torture law. Amnesty is not available to persons who are charged or guilty with the act of enforced or involuntary disappearance. They shall not benefit from any amnesty. So, I hope you have learned something from today's lecture, and see you on the next recording or lecture. God bless.